We continue with the question of redemption, chapter 5, page 47. We start with two questions. The first one is, the impetus for Zionism came particularly from people who are far from Torah and mitzvot. Does that not attest to its defective foundations and unholy origins?
What is impetus?
The motivation for it, the desire to do this, the push, right, for a country, for Israel, came from non-religious Jews.
But doesn't desire was always there to next Shana Tova?
Well, we still say it, and we said it then, and we said it for 2,000 years, right? That wasn't a desire; that was a statement, right? When we already talked about this earlier, when rabbis told their people go and get the country going, right? There was a big push against it, right, from the religious community, and we know that it was people who were from families. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. That were families from the Enlightenment more than anywhere else, who said we need a national home. For them, it was not perceived as a religious commitment, but more about cultural, historical commitment. Remember, after the Dreyfus Affair, etc., we obviously were not going to blend into European society. So the people who gave up everything to go to swamp and malaria-filled areas, right, were not people who did it for religious reasons. That's their point. Right? They did not do it for the sake of mitzvot. We'll come to Rav Kook's view of all this later, which is very important, but that's the first question. Does that mean, by definition, if the creation of the new state was by people who are not shomer mitzvahs, not protecting the mitzvahs, right, does not that prove that the state itself is defective? First question. Second question. Does the Torah attach any importance to establishing a Jewish state? Right? Where do we get that this is an important issue at all? Right? Is it, from a religious point of view, important? So these are the two issues he's going to deal with in this brief chapter. Halachic basis. Before we answer these questions, we must determine whether the Zionist approach is valid in the eyes of halacha, in the eyes of the Code of Jewish Law. According to the Rambam, Maimonides, Aliyah, ascension, going up, that's the expression of returning to the land, is going up, or immigration to Eretz Yisrael, is a biblically ordained mitzvah. That is to say, according to Maimonides, Rambam, right, there is a biblical requirement, no different than any other biblical commandment, not to eat pork. You should eat matzah. One of them is to settle the land. Right?
What's the more important?
What? Say again?
What's more important? Ptar Pidyon Chamor?
No, you're going to start this again? By the way, I meant to show you something. Remind me when we're done, okay? I have something very important I want to show you about that issue. But that's not for today. Okay? Okay. And let us not forget what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi said about those who remain in the diaspora and continue to recite prayers like, "May our eyes behold your return to Zion." It's very sad. He said, "Their utterances are like the chirping of birds, for they say these things without proper intent." This was an answer to the Khazar king saying, well, if the land of Israel is so wonderful, why is it that you don't go there? And Yehuda Halevi said, "You found my weak spot."
Yeah.
And when he pointed out, if the land of Israel is everything you say it is, why aren't you there?
But over there, then it was a lot of explanation. We're talking about, what, 12th century?
Israel is still very close to Europe. It wasn't about creating a sovereignty necessarily. It was about why aren't you there? You know, Israel was still there.
Okay.
Jewish sovereignty. Besides the individual obligation of Aliyah, the Rambam Maimonides holds that we, as a nation, must conquer the land and set up a Jewish government in its borders. They must not leave any part of it unconquered. Rabbi Yehoshua Kutner, author of Responsi Yeshu Od Malko, states this clearly. Says that even according to the Ramban, Nachmanides, who counts Yeshuv Eretz Yisrael as a positive commandment, the mitzvah is primarily fulfilled by taking possession of the land and dwelling there like a person does in his own property. We are commanded to conquer Eretz Yisrael so that we control it. I just want to double check something. I apologize when I said Jewish Sovereignty. I said Rambam, meaning Maimonides. I was wrong. I meant Ramban, Nachmanides, holds that you must conquer the entire land. There is another reason why Jewish sovereignty is so important. Without it, we cannot revoke the curse of the Churban, the destruction of the land. The Shulchan Aruch rules that one who sees the cities of Judea in ruins must rend his garments as a sign of mourning. It's an interesting thing. There used to be a tradition when you would come to the Western Wall. What was the other word for the Western Wall?
Wailing Wall.
The Wailing Wall. Why? You would come to the Western Wall, look up and see there's no temple there, and you would tear Kriya.
Not today?
In principle, you should, but strangely enough, some people, it's part of Shabbos dancing on Friday night. It is right there in front of the ruins of the temple. People are dancing, and maybe you could argue that there's joy that we have sovereignty back in Jerusalem. And this is a big step forward in the last 100 years. Obviously, it's incomplete, because there is no temple. And the tradition was always to tear Kriya when you came to the temple. Before the temple. Shulchan Aruch rules that one who sees the cities of Judea in ruins must rend his garments as a sign of mourning. The Mishnah Berurah holds that the definition of a ruined city, as opposed to a built one, does not depend on who inhabits it. Listen carefully here. This is not actually what we think of as ruins, a city that's destroyed. When a city in Israel is destroyed, the definition as follows. Rather, it depends on who is in control, who is sovereign. If the Gentiles rule the land, it is considered destroyed, and one must rend his garments upon seeing it, even if only Jews live there. That is to say, if it's under the control of the Ottomans, and you have a beautiful city, we still consider it destroyed because the nature of the cities of Israel is that we're sovereign in them. It's the one place where a Jew should feel, this is my home. If I have a complaint about the government, it's a complaint about the Jewish government, not somebody else's government, right? So it's not our traditional meaning of ruins, which is a physically destroyed building. It's that there isn't sovereignty there. Only if Jews live there and are sovereign. Obviously, this is not the forum in which to discuss the whole polemic surrounding Zionism. The preceding was just a basic overview of the sources. In any case, there is certainly strong halachic basis, Jewish law, for supporting mass aliyah in Eretz Yisrael and the establishment of a Jewish state in the land. Most of the halachic authorities of our generation would probably advocate, this is important, advocate and encourage this mitzvah if only the government would run the state in accordance with Jewish values. So obviously this is a great weakness of the state, is that many people feel that the state is really run entirely on a secular basis.
And I would respectfully disagree, because how would you consider person Shomer Mitzvah? Person who is Shomer Shabbos. Israel is Shomer Shabbos. As a state, it is Shomer Shabbos.
So
as another condition for a person, there is observation of marriage. it's a Jewish marriage observed in the land as government. And the third, if it's a person you're considering, it's a kashrut. And kashrut is government run. It means if persons change something, but generally,
so
I would consider it's actually Jewish state.
All of your arguments are very good. All of them are very good. And we've actually dealt with them earlier. Remember, we read a chapter about the fact that where do you find the yeshiva around every corner? Where is it that you find an argument about which hechsher is kosher and which is not? You have to go out of your way to find food that you couldn't eat. Whereas, here in Canada, we spent a lot of time saying, is this restaurant, does it have a hechsher? No, it doesn't. Okay. Where will we find the mikveh? Where is this? Where is that? Right?
It's mostly kosher.
When the winter comes, many of us have to explain in detail to our employers that Fridays I have to leave earlier than everybody else because the Sabbath is coming in. These are not issues in the land of Israel. They're given in the land of Israel. Even working in the in-between days, Chol Moed, between the beginning and the end of Sukkot or Pesach, are days that are permitted, and in some cases encouraged. So relative to the rest of the world, there is no dispute that Israel is a Jewish country, that it observes mitzvahs in many ways.
What language do they speak?
Right. However, relative to the desires of people who are shomer mitzvahs, when they see any element that is in conflict with that, for reasons, especially biblical issues, they're very uncomfortable with it, and they perceive it as a Hilul Hashem. As you know that when people who are not Jewish do things that are wrong, we don't necessarily view it as reflecting badly on Jews or on God, for that matter. Whereas when Jews do things that are wrong, right, that is more than just an individual problem. It's something that reflects on everybody. And so, let me just finish. And so that when you found the state, and the state was founded on more secular principles than now exist, by the way. Obviously, I think what we see is actually the proof of what we've been discussing all along. And that is that gradually, slowly, Israel is moving into a messianic state in which, the respect for Torah and the respect for halacha grows on a daily basis. It's a process. I
have to disagree with you because during the Begin time, Begin represented the government. Begin were walking at the Nasser's
I would
funeral.
be careful about this. But
you can't say this and at the same time.
No, that's because he was representing something at that moment, right? You actually cannot hold that he was shomer mitzvahs. As a representative of the Jewish state, at that moment, that was the appropriate thing for him to do. I agree. I don't want to get into the detail of what he did do and he didn't do, what he did in his private life, what he did in his public life. It's not appropriate. What I'm saying is that there is a constant tear, a constant stress between the desires of a modern pluralistic society and a shomer mitzvah Torah society. Right? And we see those stresses. Life is very different in Tel Aviv than it is in Jerusalem. We know that. Right? It's not worth debating. What I'm saying is that relative to the rest of the world, there's no question that Israel is, a Jewish country. It suffers from being a Jewish country in the eyes of the rest of the world. We know that. Right? In the eyes of those for whom the goal is the return of the temple and a Torah state, it doesn't meet that standard.
And these eyes are such a spectrum. You're talking about more than Orthodox Shomer Shabbos people. You're talking people who don't consider Israel worthy of existence. It's all spectrum.
Yes.
From point of view of people who are modern religious Zionists, for them there is no such a tear, as you say, between the country.
Oh, I think there is. At times there definitely are. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go on.
Outcome.
Okay. The outcome of this is that the Zionist ideal fulfills a biblical commandment. Painfully, though, the religious community in particular has been lax in this mitzvah. It's a very important statement. We mentioned that in the introduction, the great rabbis were actually the first to call for a return to the land. For the most part, however, religious Jews ignored this call, forfeiting their firstborn status and losing control over the building of the state. That is to say that if equal numbers of observant Jews had heeded the call at the time to return, instead of ignoring it, there would have been a much more even mix at the time of the creation of the state between all elements of the Jewish community. Since that time, I would argue that the state has moved more and more in line, frankly, with mitzvahs than it was at its original founding. And I think that we can credit a lot of elements to that. But sadly, I agree with the author here, is that the community that should have been the first to jump at the opportunity was the last. And that's most unfortunate. An instructive example, thus, we are dealing with a biblical commandment. That is to say, a law from the Bible, not a rabbinic law, which the religious community neglected to fulfill, while the secularists decided to exert themselves on its behalf. This is still one of the most curious things about it. We understand why the religious community should have done this, right? As you pointed out, at the end of every Seder, on Yom Kippur, what do we say? Next year in Yerushalayim. Next year the temple will be rebuilt. Next year, right? And we said it, but we didn't do it. And people who didn't say it went and did it. They didn't just go there. They offered their lives to fight for it, to build it, under absolutely terrible conditions. You know, you couldn't get on a plane and fly to Ben Gurion Airport. It was an awful trip just to get there, and once you got there was nothing. And you had to begin from scratch to build in terrible conditions. And people who were very idealistic about a Jewish homeland, not about a religious world, gave up everything to do this. Right? We should forever be thankful to them. Let us compare this to another similar situation. The prohibition of Lashon Hara, that is, speaking evil speech, slander, gossip. It is a mitzvah that always needs encouragement and reinforcement, even in religious circles. You shouldn't gossip about other people. Even so, the wicked, idolatrous Jews of Ahab's generation, observed
48.
Observe this mitzvah meticulously, and in that merit, Ahab won his wars. Okay, so let's get this straight. Ahab and Jezebel, very famous for being terrible kings and queens, evil, right? They were meticulous about one mitzvah. They killed people. They killed prophets, right? But they never uttered slander, right? This was their one quality. They didn't utter slander. Yeah?
How they manage, I wonder.
And, well, this is a big question, right?
There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
They didn't utter slander, and because they observed this mitzvah of avoiding slander, avoiding evil speech, Lashon Hara, we're told in Medrash Tanchuma that because of this, Ahab was successful at his wars.
We just know why, how it happened.
Now, would anyone say that it is forbidden to observe the laws of Lashon Hara because of this? Do you understand what he's saying? What he's saying is, if an evil person like Ahab and Jezebel
do the mitzvah
observe the mitzvah of avoiding slander, does that mean, oh, well, we should ignore that and we should slander people? Because if evil people do something good, then we should do the opposite.
We have Asaph, who was Kivod Re'im, was the master.
Also, that's right.
But, for example, we stopped lifting our arms while
That's not a mitzvah.
That's not a mitzvah.
Now, would anyone say that it's forbidden to observe the laws of the prohibition of slander because Ahab observed those laws?
No.
Would anyone suggest that the sinner's strict observance of the mitzvah is reason enough for us to neglect it? Is it logical to say that Achav's aversion to Lashon Hara emanated from an impure source? Would anyone even consider discouraging him from keeping this mitzvah? No. If a particular group of Jews observes a certain commandment only because of its universal moral value, does that give religious Jews the right to treat it lightly? Seemingly, we should come to the exact opposite conclusion. We should admire and learn from those who keep this mitzvah, the mitzvah in this case of settling the land, with the motivation of settling the land. Not the motivation of next year in Yerushalayim, but creating a homeland for the Jewish people, and willing to sacrifice to that. We should admire and learn from those who keep the mitzvah meticulously and try to emulate their deeds, but even from a holier foundation, a holier orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Should we hold here or
I
continue?
think we should hold.
Yeah?